My name is Dan Hennon. We're joined here with Sophia, Catherine, and Greg talking about Chapter 10, Closing the Case of Greg Fernandez's book. How's everyone doing today?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Doing good.
So for those following along at home, we're on the top of page 88 on a section called Tom Lydon, basically. This is part 2. We're continuing on here. And this chapter is very good that Greg has written with some very good information in it. All we'll do is read through the rest of this chapter, and they'll try to break it down. Continuing on, it says, quote, "This was a person that was not thinking clearly," Chief Reitzeigel told Lydon. "His mind at this point was deranged. He just was not in a normal state. He wasn't thinking rationally," end quote. This is Reitzeigel talking about allegedly David Crowley. Continuing, Tom Lydon made an interesting comment stating, David's brother left their Christmas presents on the front step to avoid a confrontation. Lydon didn't elaborate on why Dan Jr. leaving Christmas presents on the front door stoop would trigger a confrontation with his brother. Tom Lydon also made a strange comment about the rear slider being open, quote, apparently for the family dog, end quote. That doesn't make sense to me. I won't dispute the fact that Tom Lydon is an investigator, but I do wonder how much investigating he did on this case before releasing his embarrassing video report. The last time Mason Hendricks saw David, in December of 2014, David, quote, looked like he literally was eating, sleeping, and breathing on his computer. Failure was not an option for him, end quote. Yet Hendricks believed David murdered his wife and child before killing himself. Quote, and there's no denying it, end quote. That seems like failure to me. In the end, Chief Reitzeigel admitted he didn't know what caused David to murder those closest to him before committing suicide. Quote, we don't know what the trigger was. What was the breaking point? End quote. Mason Hendricks once told me, I don't think anybody's ever really going to know how it all happened. He might be right, but the reason we may never know how it all happened is because the authorities were unable to prove David guilty. Danny Mason told Tom Lydon, at the tail end of it, David was living the gray state. It almost embodied him, almost to the extent of where it would dictate a lot of his thoughts and his ideas, and his, I guess, outlook and reality, end quote. Tom Lydon finishes this up by the quote, family members on both sides declined to talk on camera. Quite frankly, they're afraid they'll be harassed by some of these conspiracy theorists out there, end quote. Well, there's a lot there, folks. Where should we start?
Again, they're saying this was a person that was not thinking clearly. His mind at that point was deranged. Wouldn't that qualify as a justification or a reason to commit these murders? But yet, didn't they say they could find no reason, nothing to point them into the direction as to why he did this?
Correct.
Yeah, so if he's deranged, that's a reason. But yet, I'm sorry. It's just so frustrating.
You trying to keep it clean, Catherine? Is that what you're saying?
Because, I mean, no matter which way they turn, they're constantly going back on themselves, left and right and center. And then I take a breather because my attitude's out of control at the moment. I'm becoming deranged. So we'll just wait.
Uh-oh. You might snap.
I'm going to snap. I mean, there's nothing in his behavior, nothing that anybody who talked to him on a regular basis, the Mikes, if I remember correctly in interviews with the Mikes, they stated Jason Allen, they never said they ever saw anything unhinged about David. So if these are people who are communicating and talking with him, how is it that Leiden and the police then state that that's what it was when they themselves said they didn't know?
Catherine, I feel like your audio is a little low.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just wondering if you backed away from the mic so you could swing your hands around while you're talking and you don't hit the mic or something, or
What's going on with it? I'm sorry. Is it any better? Is it still too low?
it's a little low, but it's better right there.
Okay, yeah.
That's much better.
My air conditioner is on, so I had to close my door because the sucker's like a rocket. It's so loud. But again, I'm just trying to figure out how Tom Leiden could go around and quote the chief in saying that David wasn't thinking clearly when everyone who spoke with David, the Mikes and Jason Allen, people who were in contact with him on a regular, periodically, and even close to when this event supposedly took place, everybody said that he seemed fine.
Right. Because again, they're saying David was a person who was not thinking clearly. Based on what?
Right. They have nothing to base that on at all.
He just was not in a normal state. I mean, these are just, there's so much speculation. How is David Crowley's family and Kamel's family not upset by this? By what they're saying here? I don't know. I don't get it.
I keep asking that question over and over, and I'm not coming up with any kind of a solution.
Yeah, only they know for sure, but they should be right here with us. Let's see. Oh, this one is weird. Tom Leiden's comment about the rear slider being open apparently for the family dog. What? That makes no sense. I mean, this is a person who has not researched this case at all. You can clearly tell by statements like this.
I would like to say.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I would like to say that just because Tom Leiden read through the report, it doesn't mean that he investigated this case. I mean, anybody could read through the report and say, "Oh, I'm an investigative journalist now," because of what Tom Leiden just did. He didn't bother to look at the case. You know, he's saying that the slider is slightly open. Well, the dog cannot fit through 1/4 of an inch. So how is that open for the dog? You know, he's just putting more BS in his thing, in his report, and it's frustrating.
Well, yeah, you're forgetting something. Paleo is the super dog, remember? He could eat underneath bodies and faces that are put toward the floor, and he can open and close a back slider with no problem. If the dog can open it, then if he would, oh my gosh, yes, you're right. Just they didn't think through any of their comments.
And they're clearly being fed something. They're clearly being told, hey, you have to respond to this. You know, I mean, there's a few things like that. Danny Mason, when he's confronted by Ben Swan about pretty much the same thing. This rear slider was a huge thing that we got very early on, and without that, without people knowing that the rear slider was opened, was not locked, that was a big question, because obviously the rear slider can only be locked from one side. So if somebody was fleeing a crime scene, they can't lock it from that side. Now they could go through the front door. So the rear slider being left open is a huge, huge red flag that, yes, did open the floodgates for a lot of theories. I won't call them conspiracy theories because what the police have here, their view is a conspiracy theory. They are all conspiring to say David Crowley is guilty. That is the definition of a conspiracy theory, is what they're doing to David Crowley here. So people want to talk about David Crowley and a conspiracy theory, look at what the police say, because that is what they have. That's not what we're doing here. That was never the point of the group. It still is not the point of the group. It was never the point of this book to point fingers and say, these guys killed David Crowley. It was never the point of this book. The point of this book is to remind people, to give you all of the evidence, to show you everything that they're saying, that we're saying, that the documents say, and how none of it says David Crowley is guilty. None of it proves with facts that David Crowley is guilty. It's speculation, it's slander. They are conspiring against David Crowley. And I think the rear slider thing was a big, big thing. That was posted, that was one of the first posts in our group, really. And I know that was a big thing that the Gray State goons, these goons, Danny Mason, all these guys, they had to backtrack on, because how do you explain that? And look at what Tom Lydon is saying. Apparently, these are legal terms. Apparently, for the family dog, it's just so stupid. It really is stupid. I mean, you got to be really dumb to really take this guy seriously.
Right,
so,
because this flies in the face of everything else they had tried to do before, because their narrative previously was there was no forced entry, no sign of forced entry. Well, you don't need forced entry if there's an open door. So, hello? Yeah, there you go.
But that's all you see throughout the police report. They keep saying it over and over and over. No forced entry, no sign of a struggle. How do you know that there was no sign of a struggle? There was pure chaos in that living room.
Sure, absolutely. That open knife could be a sign of a struggle. David Crowley's cell phone being cracked could be a sign of a struggle. I mean, there's so many different things that could be, not saying they are, but that's what signs are. They're signs of a struggle. They're saying they found nothing like that. That's totally incorrect.
Right, blood spatter going in multiple directions in the same area on the floor is sign of a struggle.
How about missing body parts?
Yeah, that. And then Stephen, in our last podcast, even stated himself that you can have a murder without anybody taking anything from the crime scene.
Happens all the time.
Yep. And, that was something that they made sure to mention in the reports also. Nothing was missing. Okay, well, that just means that this was personal. It wasn't robbery. So, I don't understand the thinking behind it.
How would they know nothing is missing? Were they there a couple weeks ago, a couple months before this happened? How do they know anything isn't missing? If they look at David's office room and they see where the dust patterns are on his desk, and they see where there's patterns, where there's evidence that there is no dust in certain areas, how do they know somebody didn't grab something the size of a DVD drive of a external hard drive and leave that house? There are areas in that house where dust should be that it is not. I mean, they're not looking
that one
for
photo.
Yeah.
That one photo, it shows a void in the dust in the office.
Right.
Where all those external hard drives are, just what you had mentioned. And I think the other one was also in the bedroom around the nightstand.
Yeah.
I believe. So,
there's some area there that is not dusty.
And so, once again. Anyway. Okay.
And I mean, that
Carry
dust
on.
could tell a good timeline. It could not. We tried early on. We tried to use that dust to try to see. Well, okay, if the bodies had been there for 3 weeks, how much dust could there be in certain areas? There should be a consistency of dust in different areas, and you just don't see that. Not including all of the other things that we've talked about here too, which is speculative, but we didn't have anything at that point. We didn't really have any of the documents. All we had was just people throwing out wild theories. We're trying to put out those fires, and then at the same time, trying to leave this open door for the families so that they could also join this group. But they were the first ones targeted. They were the first ones that were, people wanted to make sure that nobody from David Crowley's family or from Kamel's family ever joins our group or really speaks in that group. So it was just like, all of this stuff would not be happening if this was just a open and shut case. The way that Tom Lydon is acting, the way that the Apple Valley Police Department at the highest levels are acting, not talking about the first responders or anything, but the way that they're acting is just like, what are you guys covering up? Why don't you guys see what we're seeing? Put the glasses on at some point and just look at this stuff. And it was like pulling teeth to get them to look at anything. I don't know. Hopefully one day that'll change. But what's this next paragraph? David. Oh yeah. Hendricks is saying that David looked like he was literally eating, sleeping, and breathing on his computer. I mean, it's just planting those seeds. But Hendricks is also saying that David Crowley is guilty, and that's it. And I don't know, because he says here that failure, David knew that he could not fail. But isn't killing your family and yourself, isn't that failure?
I
That
love
seems
that.
like the biggest failure to me.
Yeah, that's perfect. You're so right. That seems like failure to me. And that is a failure. It's a failure on so many angles. And here's the thing. This is why I question how close really was Mason to David, because David was in contact with these guys from Hollywood, and his deal was going forward. I mean, he hadn't failed. He succeeded. There was everything going on in his life. So why would someone who has his dreams finally coming to fruition all of a sudden, I'm just going to off myself and my family because I'm a failure? Really? Mason's an idiot.
There's a lot of doublespeak from him, and this is why Hendricks does not like to be quoted, because it makes it easy to call him out on stuff like this. But this is why he will be quoted, and he will continue to be quoted, because he is lying, because he will speak in doublespeak, and that is not. There's no reason for that. It's one thing for him to say what he thinks. It's another thing for him to try to tell us what is true, and then he gets caught lying about what he is claiming is true. Of course we're going to call him out on it, because we don't know how many other people he's telling those same lies to, and that's not right. So I don't like calling people a liar without proof, and he makes it very easy to prove it with his own quotes.
Yep.
Let's see. So, in the end, the chief admitted he didn't know what caused David to murder those closest to him. He says, we don't know what the trigger was. And how do you know that there was a trigger?
Yep.
What was the breaking point? How do you know there was a breaking point? How do you know David Crowley snapped? Your job is not to say, well, we don't know this, but he's still guilty. You know, that's not what their job is. It's another reason why this case needs to be reopened by investigators who are competent, who don't have anything invested in this, because the way that the chief is acting, the way that Tom Lydon is acting, the way that Mason Hendricks is acting is like they have something invested in making sure that David Crowley is guilty. We need investigators who are going to be unbiased, who are going to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes, who are not involved in this, who have no say, who don't have to worry about CYA because they did something wrong, because they didn't see a bullet hole, because they missed a bullet hole that was in a freaking carpet, because they can't account for so many different things, so they just blame that family dog. This case, this family, they deserve much better, whether they agree with it or whether they know it or not. This family deserves much better, a thorough investigation. We keep hearing the same doublespeak. The cops did everything right, yet they suck. They're a bunch of pigs. You know, the cops did a thorough investigation, yet we've given them so many different bullet points that explain why they did not do a thorough investigation. A thorough investigation does need to be done. They're acting like it has been done. We know that it has not been done yet. But I believe that it can be done with the right person, with the right people, with the right investigators. It can be done. Now, it's up to these investigators at some point. They're going to have to do that, or else we're just going to keep doing it. Somebody has to. Somebody has to keep doing it. So I feel so blessed to have so many good people with us here now, looking into this, the different views, different angles, different, stories, whatever it is, but real people looking into this. I do believe that will help get the case reopened one day.
Yeah, and I see him using all of these pertinent words, trigger, breaking, snapped, deranged. These are very descriptive words that they can't individually apply to David and his behavior, but they use them in a way to where the implication is that this is who David was, but there's no proof of who David was. And since they can't prove it, let's just imply it. So they want people, and have been successful, people to infer from their implication that David was guilty because of these trigger words. But yet they have nothing to back them up. Nothing. And I guess that's just, I don't know of any of us that if they presented solid proof through good investigation that he indeed had done this, that not one of us would just sit there and go, okay, well, we're just going to stick with our story no matter what. But instead, we're finding the opposite true. We are showing them multiple instances where he could not have done this. It would be impossible. But yet, they still will not backtrack. They've dug their heels in, and that is that. And now everything is going to be a conspiracy theory. And it's not right.
Frustrating. Very frustrating. So I guess Tom Lydon's article came out in 2017. For some reason, I had thought it came out in 2016, but the date on it is September 19, 2017. That sounds weird. That doesn't sound right, but okay. They say so.
It was the 1 year anniversary is when it came out.
I thought, yeah, the 1 year anniversary. So why, for some reason I can't find the original. Maybe it's just backed up somewhere, but I'll definitely have to find that. So this is probably a follow-up piece to it. Because I know Tom Lydon's report came out first. That can't be right. Yeah, January January 11th, 2016 is when it first came out. Okay. That's what I thought. Only one sentence left here. Danny Mason told Tom Lydon at the tail end of it, David was living the gray state. It seems like Danny Mason wanted to live the gray state too, right? The only problem was David Crowley was cutting him out of the gray state that he wanted to live in. Maybe David saved his life. Danny Mason, maybe he would have snapped and went into a dark place and everything, and you know.
Well, where Danny wanted to take it was not where David wanted to go. You know, David finally figured out this isn't what I see for my vision of gray state. Danny Mason wanted the conspiracies, wanted all of these weird connections and paranormal stuff, and David was like, no, I want to take this a whole different way. So who truly is living and being embodied by the conspiracy? It's Danny, not David.
Yep. Because the 2013 script is what Danny August Mason contributed to, and it's dark, it's got all this weird crap in it, and then you look at the newer script and that's all been removed.
Yeah, and Dan.
Now you gotta and deliver on your face. The more things you get, the more you want. Just paying one for another. Enjoy the silence. Words like violence break the silence. Come crashing into my little world. Painful to me, pierce right through me. Can't you understand? Oh, my little girl. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm.
It's very interesting that there is a request for known DNA samples for victims, but not for a suspect. That makes me wonder if at this point they are also treating David as a victim. We know very soon that's going to change. He will be a suspect. It's pointed out that no one has been charged in this case. Page 84 is specifically referring to David Crowley, and it is quoted as saying, "Only the back portion of his skull remained attached to his spine. Rope/bracelets on his left wrist. His bare left foot was covered by a blue blanket, and his right bare foot partially exposed. A rip was observed on the left thigh of his pants. A portion of Kamel's sweater was draped over David's lower right leg. His right sleeve was pushed up, and a tattoo was visible on his right forearm. For Kamel, her left arm was under her body, extended towards the right. Her right arm extended over to her left. Both of her hands appeared to be missing. Only a portion of her skull appeared to be attached to her spine. They also noted a rip in the rear right leg, and they state that she was lying on top of a blue blanket. For Rania, she was lying on her left side with her left hand extended out to her front. Her right arm was missing. She had a blue top with white polka dots that was pulled up around her neck, exposing her torso, and she was barefoot. Page 85, personnel from the Hennepin Medical Examiner's Office entered the scene at approximately midnight on 1/18/2015. A hole was observed in the remaining portion of the skull attached to David's spine. 2 possible holes were observed in the remaining portion of Kamel's skull. A hole was observed behind Rania's left ear. Additional tattoos of David's left forearm and tattoos on Kamel's back were also found. Still page 85. The bodies were removed from the scene at approximately 1:30 a.m. on January 18, 2015. Several fragments of apparent bone and tufts of apparent hair were observed in the area rug in the living room. They found 6 cartridge cases, item 2, item 3, item 9, item 30, item 36, and item 37. They found 1 unspent round, a live round, it's item 7, 3 spent bullets, item 42, item 43, and item 44. They also have item 31, which is a bullet fragment. Regarding the bloody footprints, looking at page 86, they state that a chemical was used to enhance any possible ridge detail present within the prints. The prints were documented with photographs prior to and after the application of the enhancement chemical, page 86. So here is just one example of them taking photos before and after things are moved, before and after chemicals are sprayed and used. It's interesting on page 87, they're already talking about item 57, where they say a hole was observed in the living room ceiling near the front entry. Characteristics of the hole and its surrounding area indicate that a projectile was traveling generally west to east as it entered the ceiling and exited in the attic. A bullet, item 57, was collected from the attic in the vicinity of the hole. It's also important to note that there were two ways to get into that attic. You can get in there from the master bedroom, but you can also get to the attic from the garage. There's another entry in the garage. Sticking with the basement bullet, there's actually 5 holes here. It begins with a hole in the area rug in the living room. The second hole is in the living room floor that goes through that wood. The third hole would be above the ceiling tile in the basement. The fourth hole is the removable ceiling tile. And the fifth hole is where the bullet is retrieved from inside the wall near this hole on the south wall. Going back to the description of David, looking at page 101 now, we see that there is a rip in the navy blue shirt, quote, ripped on bottom. There is a rip near the left leg, possibly, if I'm reading this right. The left foot is covered by the blue blanket, right bare foot partially exposed. Part of Kamel's sweater was draped over David's leg, arms fully extended to his sides, right hand missing with possible tissue attached. Still on page 101. From neck of the shirt, visible vertebrae and back portion of skull attached. Piece of skull within the back part of his skull was still there. The right forearm is purple and black. Left hand is purple with leathery textured appearance. There's a tattoo on the right forearm. David's stomach is exposed, light skin with purple discoloration. His left leg through the rib, light skin with yellow discoloration. Right foot, purple discoloration with leathery appearance. Right forearm cool to the touch, stiff. Stiffness in stomach. Skin slippage, mummification, possible animal activity, and skeletalization, page 102. For Kamel, there is a rip in the right sweatpant, brown sweater lifted partially up, black undershirt, gray state shirt. We know that's a gray state t-shirt she was wearing. Tan undergarment exposed, still page 102. Lying on her stomach with her left arm under the body extended towards the right. Right arm extended over to her left. Just the skull was observed through the neck hole of the shirt, I'm guessing. I'm not sure. Neither hand visible. Right leg rip. Yellow, purple, green skin exposed on lower back and right leg through rip. A bead of liquid on the lower back and right thigh. Temperature and stiffness not checked. Skeletalization. Possible animal activity. Possible bloating. Blankets above head area of Kamel, page 104. For Rania, page 102 to 103, she was barefoot, gray sweatpants halfway down the buttocks, all the way up the front. Shirt was around her neck, entire torso exposed on the left side, left arm extended out in front, right leg crooked and knee upward, entire right arm missing, first stated as her left arm. Red, purple, yellow discoloration at the torso and left arm. Purple discoloration on both feet. Skin slippage, marbling on the torso, mummification of fingers and toes, detached hair, possible animal activity. Taking a few steps back to page 103 through 104, and some of this will be found on page 106 and 107 as well. The cartridge cases. Item 2 was found in the corner of the carpet. Item 3 was another cartridge case on the east side of the living room near the stool behind the recliner. Item 9 was found in the living room. Item 30 near the south wall to the left of David. Item 36, another bullet case to the left of David. Item 37 was found on the floor by the couch. Those are the 6 casings found here. Item 2, Item 3, Item 9, Item 30, Item 36, and Item 37. 6 cases. They should be looking for 6 bullets, but they're not. They find 4, and that's it. They find 4 bullets and leave the house. So item 42, 43, and 44 are spent cartridges that are found in the living room carpet with hair on. Item 45 is the bullet that is found in the basement that is tied to the hole labeled as F. Item 45 is the bullet from the basement that is tied to the hole labeled F. So here you have 4 bullets here. That's it. And they're happy with that. Now there is another fragment. There is item 31, which is a fragment, a bullet fragment that is found in the living room carpet near the south wall to the left of David, page 104. Then you have item 7, which is a cartridge found in the living room, never used. Did this jam? Did the gun jam and that bullet had to be taken out? Why is this bullet, why is there one live round, one unspent round found in the same area as Kamel, in the same area as where these 3 bodies are? Okay, if you look at this, if you were to look at 42, 43, 44, and 45, okay, we know that those are bullets found, right? Item 31, you could try to tie that to one of the other bullets. They still leave the house with 6 cartridge cases and only 4 bullets. And there's 2 other bullets in the house they won't find till 2 days later and 1 month later. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. We are now going to look at item 53. This is the bullet that was found on January 20th, 2015. I'll show you the photos first. There's only 6 photos, and then we'll discuss it. So let's go through these 6 photos here. This is pulled up against the blood wall. So where that couch was, the couch has now been moved, and this desk is pushed up against that same wall. You can see to the far left, you can even see that the white painting of that wall, because when the cleaners came in, they painted this wall white to cover up that blood painting, the blood smearing, all that stuff. So when the cleaners came in, they painted this, got rid of the Allahu Akbar written in blood, but this is that same wall. This is the west wall. You can barely see that mushroom bullet right there in the center on the floor. This rolled out of a carpet. I'm assuming the living room carpet. We'll get to that. Here is a comparison to a pin. Shows you exactly where it is. Let's go to the next one. Taking measurements here. Doesn't appear to be any blood or anything, but apparently blood was found on that, and the blood matched Rania, the 5-year-old daughter. So on January 18th, they leave the house without this bullet. Here's another shot of the bullet. Reading from Brian Bones' report here. At approximately 1300 hours on 1/20/2015, Detective McKnight was contacted by the company cleaning up the Crowley residence at the request of David's father. The cleanup crew personnel notified Detective McKnight that they had discovered a bullet at the residence. They relayed to Detective McKnight that while picking up the rug from the main living room area, a bullet had come out of the carpet and fallen to the floor. They were uncertain exactly where the bullet had been on the carpet, but said that it had fallen out of the rug and onto the adjacent hardwood floor. I responded back to the scene where I assisted in collecting the bullet that was discovered. I photographed the area, finding that the crime scene cleanup crew had cleaned up the residence. So they're not exactly sure where the bullet was, but it was attached to that carpet. And somehow the crime scene team, the BCA, they missed this. Collecting evidence. Everybody collecting evidence missed this. The bullet will be transferred to the BCA crime lab for further analysis. It should be noted that the bullet was predominantly flat on the back and was sitting on the front mushroom portion of the bullet. The bullet appeared to be mostly intact at the time of our discovering it. The photographs of the bullet were later downloaded to a secure server at the Apple Valley Police Department. So that's what Brian Bones says about item 53. Here's what Detective McKnight says about item 53. Since these meetings, I've worked with the family on a number of issues, including getting the dog that was found in the house to DJ. They also asked that I work with the biotech crime scene team and escort them into the house. I was contacted by the cleanup team while they were in process. They stated that they had located a bullet that had been rolled up in the carpet. The bullet had rolled out under the hardwood floor that had already been cleaned. I went to the house and assisted Detective Bone and Booth in collecting the bullet. Here's another interesting thing about item 53 is when the blood tests are done, when the DNA tests are done, it is found that there is a mixture of 2 or more people. David and Kamel are excluded from being contributors. So we have another person here, another person that contributed to item 53. Very curious there, right? Perhaps this might be the biggest smoking gun of them all. Does this show that somebody else was in the house? Does this show that somebody else was in the house at the time of the murders, at the time of these killings? How does item 53 match Rania, but not David or Kamel? It's an interesting one there. There's also mention in the BCA report that item 53 was shot from item 1. So if they believe that item 1 shot item 53, yet item 53 is showing 2 people's DNA and David and Kamel are excluded, could that mean that somebody else fired item 53 from item 1? Whatever the case, it is 2 or more DNA profiles that were found on item 53. One matches Rania. It does not match David and Kamel. Let's now look at item 57. Item 57 is also a bullet that was found on February 18, 2015. No blood is found on this bullet, but the DNA profile does match David Crowley. In all of the photos that we have, there is one that shows the ceiling where the bullet should have been on January 17th. Let's look at that one. And here is the only image that we have so far that would show whether or not a bullet hole was in the living room ceiling when the police first entered this house on January 17th, when these photos were first taken. This photo is included so that way you can see what it looked like 1 month later, what the house looked like there. In the second image, we're pulling back a little bit. You can see that the marker on the south wall is still there. I'm not sure if blood is still there or not. Let's look at the third image here. Getting another shot. And you can see definitely some things look white there. 2 different types of curtains, both red, not matching at all. The shoes are still there on the ground. Let's look at the next one. Now we're getting a closer image. So hard for me to say exactly if that's before or after Joe Cooksley puts his finger through this hole. So the reason that this hole might look a little big to us right now is because by this point, Joe Cooksley has already put his finger through it. All right, here's another angle of that hole that you can see there. They don't mention any traces of blood or anything like that here. So let's go to the next one. An even closer image. This is going to lead up into the attic. Let's go to the next one. Now we're pulling back a little bit so we can see where somebody would have to be standing or sitting, kneeling, etc. for the bullet to enter in this way. Let's go to the next one. It's going to give us a little more close-up view here. It's a pretty big hole. Obviously, you're not going to miss that one right there. So I'm assuming that is when, definitely after Joe Cooksley put his finger through it for whatever reason. Here's another image scrolling to the next one. We get to see that hole in the distance from the light for one last time. That'll be the last one at this distance. Let's go to the next one with the marker there, and you can see. Now, if the marker is up, I would hope that this was taken before Joe Cooksley put his finger through this hole. Hard to really tell. It would be good to follow up on that for sure. Here's from another angle, same one. You can see the distance. It's a big hole at this point. Now we're going into the attic. This is from the master bedroom. You can also get to the same attic from the garage. And I believe one person went up this way and the other BCA crime scene team person went through the garage, and they scattered the attic. They looked through the attic. What you'll notice here, though, in the next photo right here, is that there is a ladder there. And this ladder was not there when police left this house on the 17th. Not clear if it was there when the police left the house on January 20th or not. But that's how they got up there, or that's how somebody got up there. So somebody was up there, and we know that that was Chris Klein, Mason Hendricks, and that cast of characters, a group of them. Depending on who you ask, you might get different stories about who exactly was in the house on January 19th. We'll get to that later. And here's another shot to show the distance, how far back it was. Let's go to the next one. We're now in the attic. Okay, so hard to see there where it is, but it's kind of in the upper left corner is where the bullet is. Let's go to the next photo. Getting another angle so you can see the drywall. The bullet goes up through this attic. Skip to the next one. Hits this top paneling here. You can see by the white marks there. Let's go to the next one. And lands right here. You can see exactly where the bullet lands. Next shot is a little close-up view, closer view of that one. Let's go to the next one here. It's a close-up view of that hole. Let's go to the next one. Close-up view of the plywood leading to the roof. Next one. It is now labeled as item 57. Next shot, a closer view of item 57 as well. Next one gives us item 57 still, but now we're pulling back a little bit so we can see exactly where the bullet went into the attic and then bounced back down. Hopefully that will help somebody give us some clear indication of where the bullet was coming from here. Here's an even further view, a little pulled back a little bit more. These are all DSC, by the way. Next one. Now, some of these were included in the BCA photos that we got later on, unlike item 53. And let's go to the last image here, and you can see where the white markings are and where the bullet probably ricocheted. But in order for it to ricochet here, to land back down where item 57 is found, how far away would someone have to be? Would someone have to be literally on the ground? And none of that answers the question of why police missed this either. So let's read from the police reports. This is Brian Bones' police report about Chris Klein. This is where it gets very interesting. Okay, on 2/17, I spoke to Christopher Klein, who identified himself as a friend of the Crowley family. I had been trying to locate Klein to learn why he had been at the Crowley residence on 1/19 as a neighbor had called in about a suspicious person at the house. Klein received my business card at his residence and called me back at approximately 1700 hours on 2/17/15. Klein wanted to ask me questions about the status of the investigation and was speculating about how many rounds had been discharged at the house. He indicated to me that he had been in the house since the discovery of the Crowley family at the residence. He said he had been there with David's father and brother and had seen there were 2 shot rounds in the floor and roof. Prior to this conversation, I was unaware of a round being shot into the ceiling roof. Detective McKnight assisted me in contacting David's father and to ask for consent, to enter the home to look for the damage to the ceiling. On 2/18/2015, Detective McKnight spoke to Daniel Crowley. and obtained permission to go into the house. At approximately 1500 hours, Detective McKnight and I used the house key in the front door lockbox to gain entry into the house. We immediately found what appeared to be a bullet hole in the ceiling near the front door and adjacent to the living room. From my initial looking at the hole in the ceiling, it appeared that the bullet may have come from the living room area. Based on the angle, the bullet appeared to have traveled through the sheetrock. We looked for access to the attic area of the house and found that the attic access from the master bedroom room closet was open. This had not been open at the time of our initial search of the house on 1/17/15. I contacted the BCA crime scene team and advised them of our findings. I requested they assist us in documenting the damage and assist in looking for the bullet in the ceiling and attic area. We secured the house, and Detective McKnight maintained security on the house while I obtained a warrant for the house. I prepared a search warrant for the house to recover the bullet believed to be in the ceiling or attic area. On 2/18/15 at 16:25 hours, the Honorable Judge S. Moynihan signed a search warrant granting us access to the house to recover what was believed to be a bullet from the ceiling. Detective McKnight NTS assisted me in executing the warrant with the assistance of the BCA crime scene team and Special Agent Olson with the BCA. During the warrant, they found what is believed to be a bullet in the attic area of the house. See the BCA crime scene team's report and photos for more information on the bullet. The BCA crime scene team collected the bullet and completed a property receipt, which was left at the house. Here's where it gets interesting. On 2/19/14, I viewed photos taken from the initial search of the house. In viewing these photos, I could see the hole in the ceiling, which we discovered on 2/18/15. So he's claiming the photos do exist. This is still Brian Bone. The photos do exist that show a bullet hole was in the living room ceiling on January 17th. But he also states here that he did not see it. He was not aware that a bullet hole existed on January 17th. Nobody was. Nobody was. Detective Gummert was a little more evasive in his answer about that. He said that he did see the bullet hole, but he wasn't sure when. Suspicious activity. On January 19, 2015, a neighbor called police and reported suspicious activity at the Crowley residence. The caller refused to give a name, but claimed to live a few houses down from 1051 Ramsdale Drive. 2 days earlier, the bodies of David, Kamel, and Rania Crowley were found in the living room of their house. 15 minutes prior to the call to authorities, a GMC Blazer truck with army paint stopped in front of the Crowley residence. An unknown male got out of the truck and tried to enter the house. Unfortunately, the caller was unsure if the man was able to get inside. The caller did not provide the license plate of the vehicle. The entire incident of suspicious activity lasted 16 minutes and 38 seconds. The call was placed at 12:51 p.m., January 19th. At 12:52, Apple Valley Police Units 4949 and 4918 were assigned to the incident. Unit 4943 was also assigned to the incident at 12:53. Unit 4918 was the first officer to arrive at 1051 Ramsdale Drive in Apple Valley, Minnesota at 12:56. Unit 4918 noticed flowers on the front step. Unit 4949 arrived 2 minutes later at 12:59. Unit 4943 arrived at 1300 hours. According to the incident detail report, it was unknown who was at the residence or why. It is not known if the person who tried to enter the house left the flowers. The incident was closed at 13:08. If the caller's timeline is correct, this gave the unknown male about 20 minutes to enter and exit the house before police arrived. It's also not clear from this incident report whether or not the unknown male in the camouflage truck was the driver or passenger. When Detective Brian Bone finally spoke with friend of the family Chris Klein on February 17, 2015 at 1700 hours, the detective learned two very important pieces of information. First, Klein claimed he was in the house with David's brother and father. Second, Klein told him about a bullet hole in the living room ceiling. I had been trying to locate Klein, Bone wrote in his supplemental report, to learn why he had been at the Crowley residence on 1/19/15, as a neighbor had called in about a suspicious person at the house. Now, in the beginning of their call, Klein asked the police about the status of the investigation and speculated about how many rounds had been discharged at the house. Klein claimed he was in the house with David's brother and father. He indicated to me, Bone stated in his report, that he had been in the house since the discovery of the Crowley family at the residence. He said he had been there with David's father and brother and had seen that there were 2 shot rounds in the floor and roof. Prior to this conversation, I was not aware of a round being shot into the ceiling/roof. Detective Bone relayed the new information to Detective Sean McKnight, who then asked David's father, Dan Crowley Sr., for permission to enter the house to look for the damage to the ceiling. Now, the following day, on February 18, 2015, at 1500 hours, Detective Bone and Detective McKnight returned to the Crowley home. We immediately found what appeared to be a bullet hole in the ceiling, wrote Detective Bone, near the front door and adjacent to the living room. Bone also wrote about the possible trajectory of the bullet, speculating the shot must have come from the living room area. When the detectives looked for access to the attic, they discovered the attic access from the master bedroom closet was open. This had not been open at the time of our initial search of the house on 1/17/15, Bone reported. I contacted the BCA crime scene team and advised them of our findings. I requested they assist us in documenting the damage and assist in looking for the bullet in the ceiling and attic area. With the house secure, Detective Sean McKnight remained in the driveway while Detective Bone obtained the search warrant. The search warrant was signed by Judge S. Moynihan at 1625 on February 18, 2015. Detective McKnight and Detective Tietz assisted me in executing the warrant, Detective Bone continued, with the assistance of the BCA crime scene team and Special Agent Olson with the BCA. During the warrant, they found what is believed to be a bullet in the attic area of the house. In the end, Detective Sean McKnight reported, the information given to Detective Bone could not be verified since we could not establish a definite connection between the reporter and the family. McKnight also wrote about the several bullets unaccounted for when authorities left the house on January 17th. During the initial processing of the crime scene, we knew that we could not account for several bullets that may have been fired from the gun used. McKnight stated the bullet hole was near the entryway in close proximity to where the Christmas tree had been. McKnight and Detective Michael Tietz assisted the BCA crime scene team in locating and documenting the location of the bullet. The crime scene team took measures of the bullet hole and collected the bullet for further examination. At some point, Joe Cooksley put his finger through this bullet hole. Chris Klein is the only reason why authorities know about the bullet hole in the living room ceiling and the bullet found in the attic. This bullet, item 57, does not have blood on it, only David's nuclear DNA. Authorities seem unable to tie item 57 to David's gun. More so, they cannot put the gun in David's hand. In and out. Who was in the Crowley residence on January 19, 2015? Why are there so many different stories being told by those who believe David Crowley is guilty? For instance, Chris Klein claimed he was in the house with David's dad and brother. David's dad told Detective McKnight that was not true. Authorities respond by never following up on the differing stories. Mason Hendricks stated he was in the house with Klein. Of course, this was the same guy who claimed the reason why the public got so little information a year after the deaths was because the Department of Homeland Security was involved. Detective Gummert stated that DHS was never involved. Hendricks also tried to tell me that the FBI was involved. Again, Detective Gummert stated that was not true. Regardless, Mason Hendricks claimed to have seen the bullet hole in the house and claims to have been in the attic on January 19, 2015. Hendricks claimed he walked in the house with at least 2 other people that day. Hendricks looked up in the ceiling and immediately saw the bullet hole. I looked over to another friend of ours, Hendricks told me, and I was like, they couldn't fucking see that hole right there? How did Hendricks know police missed the bullet hole? More so, why didn't Hendricks or anyone else in the house with him inform authorities about a bullet hole, especially since they knew police didn't know about it? Hendricks was wrong when he claimed David's blood was on the bullet. He was wrong when he said it was proven item 57 came from David's gun. He was wrong when he said David's fingerprints were on the gun. He was wrong when he stated the bullet hole was blocking the Christmas tree on January 17, 2015. Hendricks was also wrong when he stated DHS and FBI had to, quote, sign off before the public got information from authorities. Was Mason Hendricks also wrong when he stated the pack theory came from one of David's parents? Hendricks stated that the pack theory originated from one of David's parents. I just want to make sure I say that twice. There's no evidence of a pact between David and Kamel to commit suicide and murder their 5-year-old daughter, but that hasn't stopped some from trying to connect those dots, which is fine. But if you're talking about that, then what you're talking about is not a double murder suicide. At that point, you're talking about a double suicide murder. And that would go against everything we're seeing here, even the official theory, all right? So even if that's true, it's one more reason for the case to be reopened, even though I highly doubt that that's true. But we got to go through every lead. Somebody's got to look at it. I don't want to discourage anybody who thinks that there is a pack theory. I just say, do your research. If you find the evidence, okay, great, go with it. If you don't, just make sure that it's, you know, it's just phrased so that it's not fact and that it is pure speculation. Pure imagination is kind of what I call it. But again, that's just my view. David Crowley's neighbor, Judy Prochnow, still believes there was a pact between David and Kamel to ascend out of this world by committing a double murder suicide. Still, Judy told me, I don't think Dan or Kate, I don't know for sure, but I don't think they didn't want to believe that David even did it. So I don't think they even thought of a pact theory. Mrs. Prochnow also tells a different story about January 19, 2015. No one was in the house before the cleaners, Prochnow explained to me. Chris Klein and them were in the house the day after the cleaners called about finding the bullet. To be clear, Chris Klein and others were in the house on January 19, 2015. The cleaners didn't find the bullet that rolled out of the carpet until January 20th, 2015. So, once again, Judy Prochnow is incorrect. When I reminded Judy that Klein was in the house on January 19th, she responded with, well, the cops might say that, but they weren't. Sounds like she's accusing the cops of lying. Judy believes Chris Klein was wrong about the date he was at the Crowley home. He just got the dates mixed up. The police record shows something different. And Klein confirmed that he was there on the 19th with the police. Who are you going to believe? Now, the date on Detective Bones' report and in the incident report are clear. I think it's Judy who got the dates mixed up, not anyone else. The neighbor, whoever called, Judy continued, took down the license plate of the cars that were there and called into police. One of them was Chris Klein's, and I know one of them was Mason's. She's talking about Mason Hendricks. How would she know that? These are just a few examples of the many conflicting stories related to the events of January 19, 2015 about the David Crowley family. Based on a call about suspicious activity, Detective Bone went looking for a suspicious person, not persons. The suspicious activity tells the story of item 57, the bullet found in the attic 1 month after the deceased were removed from the house. Item 57 is one of the many reasons why this case should be reopened and re-examined, reclassified, undetermined, something to that effect. This is not a double murder suicide. It is not a proven double murder suicide. All right, and once again, thank you everybody for staying involved in this and trying to stay on top of this and trying to figure out what the real story is when it comes to the alleged double murder suicide that David Crowley committed. Even though we're finding no evidence to support that theory, it's important to understand that that is the theory that the police go with. Their final conclusion is exceptionally cleared. It's not that David Crowley is guilty of a double murder suicide, but based on the fact that they say exceptionally cleared, that is supposed to mean that, well, David's guilty. Okay, and the evidence that David is guilty is because they couldn't find evidence to show anybody else was. Apologize for the bad audio right here. I am driving in traffic, and just another beautiful day. We can only do so much. We can only go so far. And let's see how far we can get. Let's see how close to the truth we can actually get, because I don't believe that we've been given the truth. And I'm not satisfied with the conclusion that is not a conclusion. I'm not satisfied with that. And I'm sure a lot of you feel that same way. So going back over these articles and trying to make audio versions of this stuff, which will be included in my book, by the way. A lot of this will be in there. Might be a little revised, maybe shortened down, maybe even expanded on in some cases. All the information is very important, and it's important to recognize that there are evil people out there that are trying to deceive real researchers from looking into this case. They're trying to silence us. They're trying to silence you. Why would they do that if the truth is the truth is the truth? There would be no need for that. You would only do that if you're trying to hide something, if you're just a jerk, or if you're mentally ill. And sometimes it's all of the above. So we just got to be prepared for whatever comes our way. I pray about it. I pray God give me strength. I pray he gives you all strength. All of you out there who are really researching this, who are looking to find what the answers are. We're going to do our part. I'm going to do my part to help get as much information out there, to help you make it a little easier for you to research, if I can, to answer some of these questions that keep coming back. As usual, the book that I write is, I'm really writing it for me. The book is written for me so that I have data that I can always go back to in the coming months when it's ever needed to keep this case going until we get some real answers. That is the goal. The goal is not to keep the case going forever and ever. And the goal is also not to come to a quick conclusion just because that's the easier thing, and that's just lazy writing, lazy booking, as they would call it in the wrestling business. But not going to have any of that. And people who are doing the lazy booking, lazy reporting, the lazy researching, they're going to get called out. They've already been called out. They know who they are. They know what the real deal is. They know they don't have enough to prove David Crowley guilty. The police know that. They're going with it. These other people want to go with it too. Go where you want. Go where the truth leads you. That's what we're going to do too. We're going to go exactly where the truth leads us to, wherever that is. And if it's God's will, we will get there. No doubt. No doubt. So, making this video, I wouldn't say it was hard, but it's just like, wow, I had totally forgot how many times Mason Hendricks lied. And you can add this to the list of people that have lied, where their stories have changed. Everything changes. They tell one person one thing and tell somebody else a completely different story. So, had a lot of that. And I think they were just hoping that we would just go away, fade off. But it's not going to happen. It's really not. You're talking about a 5-year-old child, talking about a U.S. combat soldier, talking about a young woman under 30. These are not things to be taken lightly. This is not something that we should take lightly. This is real stuff here. So I would just hope that everybody kind of keeps that in mind. Again, sorry for all the loud background noise on this. I know it's a lot different than the audio that was playing, but I think it's very interesting the way that so many people who consider themselves friends of David Crowley and friends of the family, and how they've treated this case, how they've treated truth, how they've treated lies, how they've treated the people that are asking questions and looking into this. Why come after us? Why bother us? Why do you care? Who cares? If there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to hide. If you make the accusation there is something to hide, knowing that there isn't anything to hide, now you box yourself into a corner. I think a lot of these people who think that David Crowley is guilty have really boxed themselves into a corner because they cannot explain why. They cannot answer that question. All that they can do is try to throw it back and say, well, you can't prove that he's not. Well, that's not the question. That's the answer. That's the answer to your question. And that's why you fail. And that's why you lose. That's why you're in the spot that you're in. That's why your life is where it is right now. Because you're not looking at truth. You're not looking for truth. You're looking past truth. You're ignoring truth. You're living in a dream world. And eventually, that world is going to come crashing down. And the real world kicks in. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do that day when you realize, you wake up, you realize, you know what? They're right. David Crowley cannot be proven guilty. They're right. There is no evidence to prove David guilty. That's going to happen. That day is coming. When that day comes, don't sit in the corner and cry. It's always time to repent. It's always time to see that light. And you will see it. Are you going to go to it? You're going to be blinded by it. As we move on,
I guess first let's go with your conversation that you actually had with the father and where everything got lost in translation after that.
Yeah, just to expand on that, it was the August of 2015, after the murders, I attempted to reach Anjum Alam, the father of Komel and Sidra. And later that afternoon, I got a call back, and certainly enough, it was Mr. Alam, confirmed that it was him, and it certainly was, and we spoke for 35 minutes. A nice guy, easy to talk to, was very pleasant. We had offered... he had made the comment that if money wasn't an issue, he would look into hiring an investigative team, and do some research to bring to what really happened here in this case. I had offered directly on the phone and said, at any time, if you want to do that and give us the green light, we'd help you with fundraising efforts or whatever would need to be done to do that, to bring the truth out. But he was very pleasant to deal with. I enjoyed talking with him, and he's very, very nice. Sidra, in communicating with her, the younger sister of Komel, also did reiterate that the family opened up their arms and accepted David in and had good times with him. Sidra said
all right, we are now live. Thank you, everyone, for joining this. Everyone who is going to watch this. I see Catherine. I see Derek. Thank you both for being here. God bless you both. And we have a very special guest here today. So, my friend, why don't you go ahead, if you don't mind, give us a little introduction about yourself. And I know we've got some questions. Catherine has some questions. If anybody in the chat room has some, it sounds like you'll be happy to answer those right now here live with us.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is retired Army Infantry Sergeant Matthew Arthur Nikolai. I served from 2007 to 2015. I was medically discharged from the Army Infantry as 11 Charlie. I served with none other than my brother in arms, David Crowley, who was an absolutely phenomenal soldier, a wonderful human being, and his story needs to be told. And the justice for him and his family needs to come now and swiftly. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
It would probably help if I unmuted myself. Then maybe that would work. That
There you go. I've done it all the
Maybe rule
time.
number one.
I'm telling you, as I played Call of Duty professionally all the time, I've had nothing but problems with mics not being muted, and the wrong button, the stream cutting off, lost frames. It's common.
I mean, I can only
you
see it
using-
on my screen. It shows that I'm muted here, but I guess I wasn't paying attention to my own
Right.
screen here.
Are you using Streamlabs OBS or a different software?
We're using StreamYard. So
StreamYard.
is-
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
it's pretty interesting. Yeah, because you can see the
Excellent.
little duck in the corner. Anyone who's watching
Oh,
this
there
on
it is.
YouTube,
There
they'll
it
see
is.
the
I
duck
get it,
there.
yeah.
So they'll know that
That's
this
how
is
I
the
did it.
free version of it. But that's cool.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my friend Catherine, she has about 8 questions here for you, and I'm just going to run through these here, and I think that's a good way to start this off. Question number 1: Did David talk about Kamel? Did you serve with him or did you serve with him prior to meeting her?
No, I actually did not have the opportunity to meet his wife because I graduated from basic training and then was immediately sent to Fort Hood to deploy 3 weeks later. That's when I actually was introduced to David and his stellar reputation as being a very, very hard-nosed NCO, but fair and balanced.
Nice.
I know that she was an absolute gem for him and giving him the solace and peace that he was searching for as a man who was tormented by these deployments and war. So her memory is not lost. It lives freely on. So we have that.
Excellent. So you started service in what year?
2007. I actually swore in, just by no mistake of the cosmos, September 11th, 2007. No joke.
Interesting. Wow. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
So it was quite a trip, but I was 24. I wasn't really going anywhere with my life, and I decided, you know what? I need to do something. I need to change something. I need to make a commitment to something as a young man, and that's what I did. I joined the infantry, and couldn't have happened to a better group of guys while I served. And the whole joke is that if you're in the infantry, you're some moron. You can't go to college, whatever. Some of the smartest men I ever met was while serving in the United States Army Infantry. I mean, some guys scored on the ASVAB, 98s, 99s, and it was just phenomenal to converse with them and work with them. David, being the intelligent person that he was, I looked upon him as a mentor, and I was just, when I walked onto Fort Hood the first time, I felt like I had never been born. And I was introduced to him on a weapons draw, and he was just like, "Hey, why is your charging handle to the rear?" And I was just like, "So you can inspect it easier, Sergeant." And he was just like, "Oh, we got a smart ass on our hand." And I was like, "Yes, Sergeant, that is true." And we became good friends right after that because he knew that I looked upon him as someone that I could aspire to be in the ranks of the NCO world and brotherhood. So he was a great light in my service.
That's pretty interesting. And that was in what was that in the States or was that overseas when this
That was at Fort Hood, Texas. I didn't have I actually came into the service as an E4 because I already had my college degree. So when I walked on, I kind of felt like I was a Buck Cherry private, even though I was 4 grades above most people. But I treated it humbly and with respect because I knew I had to earn my place as a specialist there because I didn't have the experience. These guys had been training for a year and a half when I walked on, and they didn't know me from Adam. So I had to be very humble in those times. But I learned a lot from David. He made it the transition easier for me.
Very cool. That's pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to go to question number 2 here. Again, depending on when you served with David, how did he speak about his daughter? Was he excited, scared, uncertain about having a child? So you may not have, well, you may have. I'll let you answer the question. I'm not going to answer.
I have a little bit. I mean, he was giddy about it. He was excited, but also, as as any first-time father knows, if they're true to their word, it takes a gentle man to raise a daughter. And he was, even though he was very focused on what he was doing with his filming career and everything afterwards, he wanted to be a dad. And it can be scary for anybody. And this is coming from a guy who deployed multiple times and saw some horrific stuff on his deployments. But I had never seen him so like scared, excited mixture for bringing a child into the world, and that really like centered him besides his wife Kamala.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
All right, I'll get to the next one here. We at number 3. Did David ever speak about the government? If so, in what capacity?
Oh man.
Uh-oh.
Well, yeah, okay. Um, well, I mean, I was in Afghanistan almost 15 years ago, so I think I could talk about this freely. Um, as we all know, David had a very laser-like focus when it came to anything he put his mind to. And when we had exited Afghanistan, we came back to Fort Hood. We were standing in line to go through our in processing for going on leave and everything else. And he was standing there talking to me, and we were talking about like going to film school and stuff like that. He's like, I'm getting out. I'm going to Full Sail University. And I was like, bro, I can't get out now. I just called me stupid. And I was just like, I have to. My wife and I are happy here. It just seems like the right fit for me. And he was like, well, I'm going to Full Sail to get my film degree. And he was very excited about it in his deadpan kind of way. I mean, he was just a matter of fact kind of guy. When he joked, it was very deadpan, but it was funny. So when we're standing there talking about it, he was just like, I'm making a film. I'm going to use my experience on transforming actual physical weapons to weapons that shoot blanks for movie theater, for movies and sound effects. And I was like, that's amazing, bro. I really want to help. But his whole focus was to expose the truth. So that's what Gray State was. And if you look at the world that we're living in now, his movie is a great depiction of what we're about to face. And as we talked about his film ideas and how he wanted to pursue Gray State and everything else, he would throw in his feelings about things like, yes, I do think that martial law is coming someday. Yes, we work for a system that, uses us as just numbers. We don't really mean anything. We're cogs in a wheel. And I'm sitting here absorbing all of this and I'm going, you know what? And I added my own information to it. And we would talk, many times when we were working out and everything, like, what are we doing here in Afghanistan? We're obviously not here to liberate anybody. And he was just like, you're absolutely right. We're here for other things. And he would discuss his feelings about how he wanted to make a difference by telling the truth. That was his major focus about government and the control that we were under while serving in the military. And that was his passion. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
So he was already talking about film school. He already had those plans. What year would you say that was? Would that be 2008, 2009?
2008, like about maybe a quarter into our tour there. And he actually ran into a snag. Like, he wasn't getting paid there for a little while. And he was making no money whatsoever, and he couldn't help out his wife back home or anything. And so I remember it distinctly. He went to our E7. Now, David had deployed already multiple times, and he went to Sergeant First Class Gustavson and was just like, I can't do this anymore, man. I don't want to do this anymore.
Wow.
And I mean, that was huge. This is coming from a hard-nosed 11 Charlie infantry soldier who was a no beat type of NCO, but he was fair about it, like I said before. And he walked right in and was like, I don't want to do this. And so Christopherson understood. I mean, in hindsight, I'm pretty sure he was kind of PO'd about it, but he probably went, you know what? I'm going to do what's best for this soldier because he's not getting what he needs, and we're going to make it work for him. So he sent him back to Kandahar, which was our main hub, the airport, and he started working in the mailroom. And that's what kind of turned his life around a little bit and made him a little bit happier because he wasn't on the line or the front line. And his demeanor and his attitude changed every time I saw him after that. So that was an interesting transition for him.
Interesting. It was breaking up a little bit there, but I think I got it. I think
No
think
worries.
it's okay. Yeah.
So he was
but
already talking about his film ideas and everything way before that he had those issues or the issues that he faced. But yeah, he was discussing it and had plans. I helped him work on it a little bit with After Effects and showing him how to use those software programs because I had spent years already learning those programs in film school. So and at the Art Institute, so it was quite fun.
oh, that's cool. So you guys kind of bonded on the film school thing and all that too. It sounds like.
Well, yeah, because when he found out that I had gone to school for media arts and animation at the Art Institute of California, San Francisco in 2003 to 2006, he was just like, I got to talk to this guy. He obviously knows about special effects. He knows how to animate. He knows how to use this stuff. Back then, we got a copy of something, we used it, and I showed him After Effects and Photoshop, and it helped brighten his world on how to make better films.
Very cool. That's
Of course.
awesome. San Francisco. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I was in the mecca of let's just call it Sodom and Gomorrah. It was pretty bad.
I hear it's worse now. Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad. Like, just to segue a little bit. I mean, I was raised in a lower middle class home in Sunnyvale, California, and I had everything I needed, but Dad was a bit hard. But I wanted to do something awesome with my life, and I decided that I was going to go study animation, and the closest school was San Francisco. And my dad just goes, "It's not like when I was there." And I was like, "I'm sure it's not." And I had to really maintain a humility and a moral focus because that place really did a number on me as far as temptation and such and whatnot.
Yeah, that's some might call that area the belly of the beast. I didn't live too far from San Francisco myself, where I grew up, so I can relate to that. So David was already kind of building this idea, maybe not the gray state, right? He probably, when you guys were serving, he probably never gave this a name or anything like that, but you could see that those seeds were already being planted. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. He was very, I mean, I don't use the term lightly. I mean, it's almost like it was destined to happen the way it did. Because when anybody decides to tell the truth in their own vision and they happen to be of military service, you're going to be a target no matter what. And if you're a believer on top of that in Yeshua HaMashiach, then, I mean, it makes it even harder because nobody wants to know the truth. They want to be happy in their own, covert worlds where they don't have to pay attention to what's really happening around them. So David was like, I'm going to take this by the horns and I'm going to tell people the truth. And that's what he did.
Very cool. Without fear.
Without fear.
Let me ask you this. Did you and David ever talk about God, ever talk about your Christianity, anything like that? Did those conversations come up?
I have to be transparent with you as all I can. I knew that there was a God, but when I was over there in Afghanistan, it wasn't something that we talked about much because unfortunately at that time in my young life, I thought I had lost my faith in God and in Yeshua, but in fact, what had happened is I lost my faith in humanity. So it was not a topic that we brought up much, but when we did, he was open to it. He listened to me when I had something to say. And that helped me understand what was happening to me when I was there, going to war. I mean, it changes people in different ways. And when I finally figured out that I had lost my faith in humanity and not Yeshua or Elohim himself, I knew that my life was going to change for the better. And I wish I could have shared more of my knowledge with David at a later time or at that point, but it was designed the way it was. So at least we had found our friendship there and became brothers in arms at that time. I don't have any regrets about it.
Did is it? Let me ask you this, maybe a more general question, but is it frowned upon to talk about God, to talk about Christ? Was it frowned upon then? Was it allowed to even have a Bible? If I wanted to have a little pocket Bible, how does that
Oh
work?
yes, that the military is very, very open to people's faith, spiritual journeys, and religions. And we could talk about it openly, but then we had to also be open to the fact that there were Satanists, there were pagans, there were people who claimed to be Jedis, people who believed in the spaghetti. No joke, we had guys who had dog tags with Jedi on it. I mean, it was it's hilarious. But some guys, they believed in the spaghetti monster, and that's what they had on their dog tags. It's like anything was open, but if you talked about it too much, especially Elohim or Yeshua, you got some side-eyed looks. I mean, it's just kind of interesting that we got chaplains walking around everywhere praying at certain events and retirement ceremonies, but when you talk about it too much, people kind of give you that look like, okay, stop preaching. That was one of my nicknames, preacher.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a compliment, I would think.
Yes, it is.
All right, here's another question from Catherine. Did David ever come across as someone who was suspicious, or did he talk like someone who noticed things without constantly looking over his shoulder?
I never knew David to be like that. He was, as I've stated, he was very matter of fact, almost to the point of meticulous on a very stellar level as an NCO. No, he didn't have any fear of looking over his shoulder. He wasn't that type of person. If he was going to tell you the truth, he was going to accept the consequences that came with it. And doing what he did with Gray State is exactly what happened. He told the truth, and what he discovered and what he found while searching for that truth got him killed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This man was a seasoned infantryman that knew his tactics, that knew when things didn't feel right. And as soon as I found out that he had been murdered, okay, the first thing that I looked at was that, wait a second, this dude wouldn't leave a door unsecure. This is not the type of man who leaves his house unsecure. The back door being open just a little bit was the dead giveaway. I was just like, that's one of the first things we check is our doors. Sometimes multiple times before we go to bed. And if you got any soldier who's come back from war in a combat zone, they'll check their front, back windows 2-3 times before they go to bed. I mean, that's just a common practice for us. I still do it to this day. So that just blew my mind when I found out the truth. And I was just like, okay, now I got to do my research and see what I can discover from this.
Very interesting. We have a question from Derek too. He wants to know if you kept in contact with David after serving.
Yes, we did. While he was working on, great question too. While he was working on Gray State, I was still serving in the military, and he would contact me. I think one of his best friends, Mitch, would contact me for ideas on how to write scripts for certain parts of the special effects, or how to do hard surface modeling for tanks and stuff, because they had to use 3D models in place of like some of the special effects they were doing. So I helped them a little bit with like finding different scripts online that could help them with tank treads and how to animate them properly and whatever. I didn't write these scripts. That's not my forte, but this is just that I found. I'm giving credit where credit's due. I would help them find little work smarter, not harder ways. So if somebody had a script, as long as you gave them credit for using it in the film, it was all good. So that was one of the things I helped out with, and showed them how to hard surface model back in the earth, like the later thousands, which was really difficult at that time. So yes, we had a lot of communication throughout the years, and told him about his family, how he was doing and whatnot. And then for a while there, I just stopped hearing from him for a few years. And, I'd send a message every now and then. Hey, how you doing, bro? Didn't get anything back. And I was just like, okay, that's a little weird. And then that's when I found out that he was taken from us too soon.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Okay, here is another one. How did David handle the stress of battle?
Now, That's a tougher one because, as I had told you before, when he was serving in Afghanistan, he went to RE7 and was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So the the stress that he was going through was is that the very people that he was sent over to liberate and possibly take their life is somebody that he married. So I think that made a very vast impact on his viewpoints when it came to what we were doing over there. And I think that's something that changed him dramatically. So he didn't really, it affected him in different ways than most people would expect. He didn't, a lot of people, when we went over there, yeah, we hated the enemy for what they had done to us on September 11th. However you feel about that is irrelevant. But his demeanor and his attitudes changed towards people and their cultures.
Okay. Here's another one. Here's a question. Did he buckle under the stress? Did you ever see David Crowley buckle under the stress?
No, I was never. I never saw him ever buckle under anything. He was a pillar. Now that doesn't mean that inside he wasn't like having any issues. We all have our demons, but on the outside he was cool and collected. He kept his head about him, and that's what helped me become the NCO that I was. You can make a decision in a split second without regard to your life, but to save others. And that's what I took from him.
Okay. Here's another one. Did the men in your unit get to make the regular phone calls home? So how did that work? Were you able to call home, things like that?
Yes, we were MWRs, so the resource centers that we had, so that way we could use computers or call home. Those were built up later in our deployment. But when we first got there, it was just open desert with a few HESCOs. We'd send it. The combat engineers would go out there, and then they'd send small units of infantry and scouts with them and stuff like that to protect them while they were out there building up FOB Ramrod. So we didn't get anything for about 3 or 4 months, and the morale around the base and the FOBs and everything was very low because we would have to go back to Kandahar from the open desert where we were at about, I think it was about, let's say 45 to 50 clicks away. And I mean, that's a long haul to go use a computer. So once we got the MWRs to make consistent phone calls and stuff, it was a lot better. But at that time, David wasn't with us. He was in Kandahar still doing the mailroom. So he probably had access to the MWR on a regular basis.
Very interesting. Here is a question from Sophia. Did you ever think David was a narcissist or had any of those tendencies?
No, I never got a narcissistic vibe from him. I was married to a narcissist for 14 years, and you can spot that in a heartbeat when you're under their prison sentence. So yeah, no, I never got anything that was narcissistic about him. He was just a very deadpan, straight to the point type of person. And if you didn't know how to handle that, you would probably think he's coming off as narcissistic, but he's not. That's just how he was. When he joked around and had fun, I mean, he showed it. He showcased his joy when he needed to.
Very cool. And then Catherine's last question on this list. Did David ever appear to be out of touch with reality?
No, that never. He was always head first into what he was doing. And the narrative that's been told through the media and everything else is a skewed representation of who he was as a person. And we can get into that when we start discussing the actual cause of his murder.
Let me ask you a question here. Did you was there anyone that did not like him, did not like David Crowley that you served with that was open about it?
Nobody never ever voiced their opinion of it, but you're a villain in someone's story. So I'm pretty sure that some people didn't like him for staying back and being in the mailroom. I didn't hear anything about it because most of the soldiers that I worked with in the mortar platoons, they enjoyed him because he was a good NCO, fair, and you could call him up so that, if you got in trouble at the strip club or whatever you were doing that was stupid at 2 a.m., because we don't make good decisions. Then, you know, he didn't want it to go any higher than it had to go. So he made it a point to be the best version of himself that he could. So no, I didn't see any of that. No.
Have you do you know who Joseph Seaton is?
Yes, I do. He was one of my
Have you
officers.
one of the theories is that Joseph Seaton was David's commanding officer. Is that true or is that not true? Do you know?
Oh gosh, Seaton was one of our LTs at the time. I'm not sure if he was over David or not, but I do know that they had communications throughout the years. I mean, like I said, this is 15 years ago. I don't remember how the structure worked after David went to the mailroom. So it is a possibility that he could have been one of his officers. Yes, he was one of mine. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I was curious about that. There was another who would be David's commanding officer? Who would he report to? And the reason why I'm asking this is because, and I'm sure maybe it was multiple people at different times, probably during his service. But the reason why I'm asking this is because I had heard another story that he had a fallout, something very bad happened with one of his commanding officers, to the point where, well, that's all I want to say publicly, probably about that.
Sure. No worries. To my knowledge, all I knew about was when he went to Sergeant First Class Christopherson to tell him that I didn't want to do this anymore. Now, what happened after that? Now, I was just a specialist. I didn't have access to the NCO knowledge tree or anything else above that. So, if anything happened with an officer, I was not privy to it. But there was talk around the platoons that something was going down with Crowley, that he was going back to Kandahar for whatever reason. I was just like, hey, you know what? He needs it. I agreed with it. I didn't care. I didn't have the experience of being at war like he did, so I wasn't going to hold it against him. At least he was honest with them.
Right. Sophia's asking about, do you know what Joseph Seaton's actual rank was?
At the time that I knew him, he had just become he was on his way to becoming a captain, I believe, but I think he was a first lieutenant at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I think he was on his way to the captain school for whatever it is for NCOs have WLC. He was going for his leadership course for becoming a captain, I believe, if I'm not that a long time ago though.
Are you in contact with any other soldiers that have served with David? Or have you been in contact since you?
Oh yeah, I'm actually here in Alabama. One of my best friends and brother in arms, Michael Williams, is actually out here, and he and I both knew him. I knew David more personally, but he knew of him and everything else. Met him a few times, but yeah, he's out here, and he's a Purple Heart recipient, 10-year cavalry scout recon, and awesome dude. Has really helped me out a lot. And if David was alive, he would be like, dude, you guys are doing well.
That's awesome. That's great. Sophia has another question here. Do you know if Joseph Seaton was actually honorably discharged? Have you heard that?
I do not know if he was honorably discharged. I did have some contact with him to help him with a website and do some animation for him, but I did the work and I never got paid. So you know how it is when that happens. So after that, I lost contact with him. So I do not know.
Interesting. Well, maybe we'll jump into when you heard about, when did you hear first that David Crowley had passed?
I was at my dining room table in Ohio. My wife was sitting on the couch. The TV was in front of me. It was on. She was watching something with the kids. It was later in the evening. We were just about to have dinner, and I was looking at my computer. I was working on my master's program for Full Sail because that's where I decided to go because David went there. And I was studying for my master's degree in media and design, and the news feeds came up, and I just stopped dead in my tracks. And I read it, and then I read it again, And then I read it again, and I just sat back in my chair and I said, babe, Charlie's dead. And I mean, as the words came out of me, it just hit me like a Mack truck straight to my soul. And she turned around and was like, what? I was just like, yeah, David's dead. And then I subsequently just, I fell apart. Like, no joke, I fell apart right in my chair. And I was just like, how does something like this happen? And of course, you know, the instinctive thing to do as a human being is to know more. And it was the wrong thing for me to choose at that point. But I had to know the truth. So I scoured every news article, every thread, every YouTube video, everything I could find. And it was 100% true. And it crushed my soul.
Did you, having served with him and having spoken with David after he passed, and knowing what PTSD is, obviously, did you ever get the feeling that David may have had PTSD?
We all come back from war different. I can't speak to what David had. That's not my place. Only what he went through is, and what is in his medical records is the truth. So I can't speak to that. He never displayed any signs to me, but you know, not all wounds are visible. I have PTSD, but anybody can. It doesn't have to be just soldiers or Marines or Navy or airmen. Anybody can get it. A child can from traumatic abuse. A female can get it from verbal abuse or physical abuse, and men can get it from different types of situations. So to that, I do not know.
Fair enough. That's a great answer. Do you think, let me ask you this, about people being falsely accused of having PTSD because they have their own narrative. Do you have any problem with that as far as they claim David did? David acts like he doesn't. Actually, even Mitch Heil, who served with David, says he doesn't believe David had PTSD. And so it's kind of like I have an issue with it because they're trying to use it to fit into their narrative, not because he had PTSD. Let's help this guy. Well, he had PTSD. He went crazy and killed his family and killed himself. To me, that kind of bothers me. Did you have any thoughts on the PTSD angle?
Absolutely. As anybody knows who served, as soon as you mention the word, the acronym PTSD, they automatically assume that, you know, you're a killer, you're a psychopath, you're a veteran who can't be helped, this, that, and the other. It's a stigma that falls upon us, and it's wrong. And, you know, as far as fitting the narrative, absolutely. That's what they use as the scapegoat so that they could pull off this atrocity without anybody really looking into it. But then you have free thinkers and researchers like yourself, me, and everybody else who is like, I smell something foul, Basil. It's like, we went through and we combed through the footage. We combed through all the pictures. We went through it and we were like, David didn't do this. Even if he had PTSD or not, no way. There's no way. And this whole thing with Mitch saying that he didn't. Well, you know what? Mitch has already made his point when he went on to whatever news source or put out those web pages, justice for David Crowley, all that stuff, Somebody probably got to him too. Let's be real. Somebody probably got to his family and got to David's family before they could really do anything about it. And they gave him an ultimatum. And it's like, here you go. Well, as anybody will say, Yeshua HaMashiach was given an ultimatum too. And that was either, we as the people decided to choose Barabbas over him. So you know what? What happened to David is an atrocity. So PTSD, no PTSD, it doesn't matter. They used it as a narrative to get him killed.
Amen to that. Catherine is asking, did you ever think that what the police were saying was true? Was the official theory? Did you ever buy into it?
Nope, not once. And the first thing that was a dead giveaway was that the back door was unsecure. I was like, nope. That's the first thing. I don't care who you are. When you're in the infantry, you are trained. You are trained meticulously well to observe your surroundings and have situational awareness. There is no way a seasoned 11 Charlie infantry soldier like David Crowley would leave a back door unsecured. Nope.
And would that be even more true if David was thinking that he was getting threats, physical threats
Right.
or verbal threats?
Absolutely. If he was receiving any type of death threats or anything for his movie or whatever the case was be for telling the truth, that he would have been in a different mode. He would have been in not necessarily high alert, but he would have been in like, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm protected. Like I got my stuff locked and I'm going to double check the surroundings and just do an extra check around the house just to make sure everything's cool.
So you probably heard a lot of the different theories about what may have happened. Was it a government hit? Was David, because of his stop loss? Are there any theories that you kind of lean towards?
Absolutely. I've had contact with certain people on TikTok that remain anonymous over the years. And I received some very interesting communications from them, talking about David and that they were being pursued by the FBI, being pursued by other government agencies, and they couldn't talk, and all of this. And I was just like, hey, anything for David. And then I lost communication with them. But I tell you, David didn't do this. And the theory that I had was, and I believe it's true, is that while David was in the filming process, we have to understand that the viewpoint that he was trying to put across is what was coming, as far as martial law, the government, making us have chips to sign stuff, biblical prophecy, this kind of stuff. I mean, it was laced with it. And my theory is that what happens to be true is that what he discovered while he was in the filming process, I mean, he discovered some very, very interesting things while he was in his pursuit for truth. And I'll leave those things open to people's imaginations. You can imagine what's in the news now as far as child trafficking, sex crimes against children, adrenochrome, the underground military bases known as DUMBs, where they lead. And you can put two and two together and pretty sure that David found something along those lines, which is what got him killed because of his movie and what it was portraying.
Interesting. The other question was, do you think his death was related to anything that may have happened during his service?
I don't think it was necessarily due to his service. It could be a part of it, but they did blame most of it on what he was pursuing as a film. So yes, actually, there could be something along the lines of like somebody was unhappy that he was stop lost, or the falling out he had with former officers and NCO staff. Very much someone could have been involved in that, but I honestly truly believe that he was murdered because of his film and what he was trying to portray as the truth.
Let me quickly talk about two wild theories that I have heard. The first theory, one theory that I heard, was that David had put a hit on one of his commanding officers. Have you ever heard anything wild like that? And would that even be possible?
I'm sorry, I have to laugh out loud. No, I'm sorry. That wow, like I should get a tinfoil hat, hat and all that. But that's even too much for me, bro. Like, come on, no. Like David wasn't like that. Come on. I mean, gee whiz, where do you guys get this stuff?
Good
I
question.
Laugh out loud at that one. Yeah, I don't. Wow, no.
That's one of the wildest ones that I've heard.
That's a humdinger.
Yeah. The other wild one that I've heard, I'll give you a second, but the other wild one that I have heard
is sorry.
It's okay. I don't know if I've ever publicly talked about that one, but that was a theory that came to me. That was a story that came to me a long time ago. And so sometimes you get good leads, sometimes you get bad leads. I like to just follow up on every possible lead. But that was probably the wildest one.
No matter how,
The other wild one that I've heard, let me get your thought on this, that there was a curse, that something happened. I believe it was when David was serving in, I think it was in Iraq, and they had something happen. They ran over some kid. The kid got killed. The kid's mother was I don't know if she was a Satanist or she was a gypsy, if I remember correctly. It's been so long since I remember this story, but she was a gypsy, and she put a curse on that whole group of people. And so there was this theory that there is this curse. David is part of some curse as something that may have happened during his service days. Have you ever heard anything wild like that?
No, I can't speak to that. I didn't serve with David in Iraq, so I didn't know about that offhand. But I will say that anything is possible in that region of the world, because we have to remember that the 12 tribes we originated from that area, Mitzrayim, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, that area. So you're dealing with a culture and a group of people who have not only the Muslim faith, but they also have underground Christianity, underground different types of religious sects that practice dark magic. So I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that. It could be a very, I mean, as outlandish as that sounds, if that's a story that people are tossing around, I'd like to find validity to that story. And then, yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
I mean, there were a couple, there are like at least 2 soldiers that served with David. I'm not exactly sure when, and I'm not sure if you know these names, but they did die. They have died since. One died, I think one committed suicide, and the other one was actually shot by a neighbor. And so that's when this story kind of came out. And again, these are just some of the things that I've heard. I have not really found any evidence to kind of back those up. But I wanted to get your thoughts on those 2 wild theories.
And as crazy as it sounds, the latter theory about that lady putting a curse on, it actually kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, you have these other 2 soldiers who were involved in the same incident, and they were taken from us, one by his own hand and then one by a neighbor. So we can see that there's a correlation, because then you've got David and his family. So honestly, that theory is actually bringing more validity to the whole idea of what happened to them, because you can see as curses are done, there's good curses, there's good spelling in the case of how we view things, and our words are power. So yeah, I could see that affecting that group of people to manifest what that theory encompasses. Yes.
Yeah, and I couldn't ever get to the point to get that person to kind of come forward, but I think they also had their own issues too. So it's not just the deaths; it's that weird things are happening. But a lot of the stuff is kind of like, well, those are things that could happen from any soldier serving. They just want to drink themselves too much, right? They go into this really depressive phase, I guess. But that's pretty interesting. So I did want to hear about that. Derek brings up a great comment here that I think a lot of people who have looked into this case probably have the same thing. Out of everything I've ever researched, this one hits me the hardest still to this day. To me, there's something very strange, something very different about this case and the layers of this case. What are your thoughts on this case compared to other murder mystery cases? I guess I'm sure you've looked into others.
Yeah, but of course. And for anybody who's got a brain, we like those old shows, Unsolved Mysteries, Cold Case Files, that kind of stuff. But put all that Hollywood stuff and whatever away, and you come down to this particular instance where you have a soldier who has infantry experience. He's married to a woman from Iraq, and I think she was from, I think she was of Iraqi descent. And then they have a child together, and you see in the photos and what's been released, what hasn't been released, and all that, and you start to dissect what you see. And as somebody who's had to engage in combat and deal with people, you notice things that other people don't. And especially when your adrenaline's pumping and stuff like that. My adrenaline was pumping when I was looking at these photos. And as I've stated in just recently, the first thing that stood out to me when I was looking at these photos was that the way the bodies were lying, and also the back door being unsecure, and then the use of actually writing that message with blood and the Quran and everything having to do with that. I was like, you know, if I wanted to paint a narrative and make a former soldier who had a good rapport with his team and everything else, was on his way to becoming a filmmaker and establishing himself, how would I make it so that way he could be discredited for the rest of his life? Well, they turned to that. They turned to writing a message in his own blood, which would scare anybody away. So as I was dissecting all this, I'm like, that's not the man I knew, nor would this man ever commit such an atrocity. And I just don't see where this is going. So then that led me down to the different YouTube videos that were being posted, the different theories along the lines of different articles and everything. And then as the years started to pile on, the theories got more outlandish and more crazy and everything else. And I was just like, no one's ever going to know the truth. Only people who truly knew him are going to understand that this was not committed by David. This was definitely a setup.
Yeah, good point. Have you seen Eric Nelson's film, A Gray State?
No, I have not watched it. I actually didn't know it got completed because I had stayed away from this for quite some time. The knowledge of David passing made it very difficult for me to participate in any of that. So no, I have not seen the film.
Yeah, it's basically, they basically use David's footage, and they basically say that David went into this dark space. He killed himself. They don't provide any evidence or anything like that. It is a 90-minute hit piece on David Crowley. That's what. Okay, maybe 87 minutes. There may be a few minutes in there that talk positively about him, but that's really it. Most of it is just, and they never provide any evidence to say, well, look, this is why David did it. They had the gun, they got the murder weapon, he has a written confession, anything like that. They also try to make it seem like David's deal was dead. David's deal was not dead. The only reason David's deal died is because David died. So there's a lot of
he was on his. Yeah, I mean, and speaking of that, I mean, he was talking to National Geographic. He was talking to different film companies. He was on his way to making this film his dream child for and platform to tell the truth. And if he had succeeded, I mean, gee whiz, would we be in the situation we are now if people knew about his truth or his version of it? So absolutely, this was. I mean, and I'll never watch that film if it's a hit piece on David. I mean, that's just them feeding into the narrative so they can bury this. I mean, that's the only thing you can do with truth is bury it. But eventually everything comes to the light, for no darkness can escape it.
Amen. Amen to that.
Yes, sir.
What was the other one here? So what are some of the things that kind of stand out? You said the rear slider, that was a big one. Let me ask you this: what would you need to convince you that David Crowley did do this? What evidence would you need to see?
Oh, well, if he actually did, commit suicide in that, one, you wouldn't have had anything to do with the Quran or writing any message in blood or anything like that. He would not have hurt his family. He would have just hurt himself, and all the doors and windows would have been secure. And he would not have done it at home, most likely.
Now, you and David had obviously talked about different film things. David probably knew that you were from California, right?
California,
yeah. If you're still there, man, I'm praying for you if you're still there. So, whoever is, I know you're not. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody who's gonna get out while you can.
Yes, please, if you can, please.
right?
And if you can't, that's okay. Maybe that's where God wants you. That's possible too.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
did David ever talk about moving to California, going to California? Did you guys ever talk about anything like that, or
No, I mean, he was
no?
happy where he was at. I mean, he had his family, he had his house, he was on his way to making his film, and I mean, all of that was great. He was living the dream. I was
This
sitting there still going to PT at 04:30. I mean, he was living the life.
this full sale that he was talking about, that's in
Mhm.
Minnesota. That's his.
No, it's actually in Florida, Orlando, Florida.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
So
he went
that was
there
his
for yeah, that's where he went to film school, and then because he went there and graduated, I decided to get my master's degree from there in media and design. So I went to that school because David said that I had a keen eye for film and animation, and I was giving him good insight. So that's one of the reasons why I went to that school and graduated with flying colors.
very cool. Right
Yes,
on.
sir.
Trying to think if I have any more questions. I mean, those are pretty much a lot of the questions. And thank you so much for answering
No
these. I really
worries.
appreciate that. If we wanted to come back and do a part two, maybe have some other people on this panel, would you be open to that at a later time?
I'm absolutely, I'm 100% open to this. One of the benefits of being retired at such a young age now, yes, I was medically retired, but you know what? It was for a good reason when I was injured over there. So I have a lot of free time. So if I can give people solace in knowing that one greater than us is coming back, and we can tell the truth with his glory and his mercy and with him as our center, then I'm going to tell the truth. And David's story needs to be told. And he was a good, righteous man who was brought into an evil situation. And unfortunately, he was taken from us. But that doesn't mean that his truth can't be told. And that's what I'm going to do. So, yes, I'd be happy to join you again.
Thank you, my friend.
Yes,
Now
sir.
you are on social media. Please let us know where you're on, what social media platforms you're on, and the different topics, everything that you cover.
Oh, certainly. What I'll do is I'll send you my link to my TikTok. It's Warrior for Yeshua, spelled out. And you can find me there. And mostly what I discuss is what's going on in the world right now, truth, quantum physics, Rubik's Cubes, and what Yeshua HaMashiach did for us, which is die on the cross so that we could live and an eternal life with him forever. And though we're going through a very hard tribulation right now with the rumors of wars and nations against nations and brother on brother, we have to understand that this is a part of our journey to attain that eternal life, because the path is wide, but the gate is very narrow. We need to be prepared.
Amen. Amen
Yes,
to
sir.
that. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking this time. I want to thank Derek for making sure that this happened. I want to thank God for everything, making sure that this happened. Everything happens for a reason. I believe this was a great reason. I've been praying about this. I've been praying about, talking to soldiers. I've had some that kind of wanted to talk, but then,
Things didn't work out. Yeah.
things didn't work out. Thank you. But yeah, I'm really glad that you spent this time, and I hope some other soldiers may look at this and may be open to talking too. I feel like there are some soldiers that serve with David that may need that closure, that may also feel the same way you do, and maybe they're not able to come out, they're not ready to come out, they don't want to talk about it. They could be very fearful of it, of things like that happening to them. I don't know how that would affect their military future or their future on anything like that. Are there any issues with that? Do you have any problem? Do you ever think about that? Like, if I come out and talk about this, maybe they may come after me?
I've always had that underlying, anxiety. And I've always told myself that if they wanted to come after me, they would. So you always have to have that in the back of your mind. We're speaking truth. And it says over 365 times in scripture to never be afraid. And then I'll leave you guys with this. Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your Yahweh. So show no fear. And if I can tie it back into the disciples and what they had to go, they died excruciatingly for faith. All of them. Only one of them ended up going to the prison mines and dying there instead of being beaten to death or crucified or whatever the case may be. In order to seek truth and righteousness, you have to be willing to die for it. And that's why I believe that Yeshua HaMashiach died on the cross for all of us so we can live. No fear.
No fear. Amen. Thank you very much. I think that's a great place to end this right here. I want to thank everybody who has watched this, everybody who will see this. If you have any questions, we're going to get him back on at some point here. So if you have any questions that we didn't get to, I know I just kind of sprung this. We just went live, like, boom, we're live. Okay, good. So questions may start filtering in, and we'll be happy to do a part 2 and have you come back and answer some of those questions. So thank you very much.
I appreciate you, Mr. Craig and everybody else who is involved, and Mr. Derek. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll see you guys soon. Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh. God bless you all.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.
You too.